Welcome to the Twinkl Talks EYFS podcast. Working in the early years is busy, funny, messy, and exhausting. Join me, Shana, some of the Twinkl EYFS team, special guest speakers, and other early years practitioners as we talk honestly about our experiences. Whether you're listening for CPD, on your commute, or to help you relax, Twinkl EYFS will share everything you need to know about all things early years.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Twinkl Talks EYFS. My name's Katie.
And I'm Charlotte.
And I'm Georgia.
And in this episode, we're going to be talking all things Ofsted and inspection changes. So in the last couple of weeks, they've dropped a new inspection handbook and some webinars giving you a little bit more information about what will be changing and what we need to be keeping in mind. So Georgia herself actually went to one of these talks this week. So Georgia, I'd love to just get your thoughts about how the talk actually went and how it felt to you.
Hi, yeah, sure. So myself and Tracy, our thought leader, attended last night and the session was really interesting. It ran for about an hour and we heard from 3 different speakers, each of them giving their perspective on what's new in Ofsted and what that could mean for us in the sector.
Perfect. Thank you, Georgia. And from the information that Georgia has shared with us and what we already know from the inspection handbook that was released, there are quite a few different changes. So for you to get the most reliable and up-to-date information, you need to be actually looking at that inspection handbook yourself, watching the webinar yourself, keeping up to date with things that are officially released by the Department for Education and Ofsted. But from what I've noticed, I think the 5 biggest changes are there's a different inspection layout on the day. There's going to be a new grading system, so no one's going to be good or outstanding anymore. There's a big focus on inclusion, increased focus on staff wellbeing, and the timeline of when people will be inspected is slightly different. So let's focus first of all on the inspection layout, because that's the one that affects everyone regardless of their position, whether you're a manager, an apprentice, or a day-to-day practitioner. That's the one we all want to know about, because that's the one that makes us poo our pants every time we hear the word Ofsted. So I think the main thing is that there aren't going to be any more learning walks, which I think is very interesting, because it depends on what your perspective of the learning walk was, but I personally thought they were a great opportunity to give your inspector some context about how things worked at your nursery, and actually seeing things in action is a really good prompt and reminder for you to say, oh, this is what we do in baby room because of XYZ. And as you can see in preschool or the not canteen, but dining room, this is what we do.
It's really interesting that you mention the context, because actually within the webinar there was a huge focus on inspectors gaining the context of settings, which I think you're absolutely right. The learning walk was a good opportunity for inspectors to do that, but instead that's going to be replaced with a phone call. So all the information that they would have gathered in the learning walk, they will now gather in a phone call prior to the inspection. That's
really interesting. So whereas before the phone call was very much just like, we're coming to see you, how many children are going to be on roll, staff, blah, blah. It's now like, actually, before we come to your setting, we want to know a little bit about you so that we can make sure we're looking at the right things that are suitable for you. That's how I take that.
Yeah, I agree. That's how they explained it too.
And then around that, from what I understand, is the general then inspection on the day doesn't seem, in my opinion, to look that different. They're still going to be doing shared observations with leaders in the setting. They're still going to be talking to parents and understand how they feel about the setting. They're still going to be doing like case samples of following children around and understanding more about their development. They're going to still talk to practitioners to learn more about what they understand. They'll have conversations with the DSL because there's like a renewed focus on safeguarding, which we all knew was coming with the 2025 EYFS reforms. And then you get feedback. So I think overall, the day-to-day doesn't feel like it will be extremely different.
No, I feel like the main thing will be the removal of the learning walk more than anything. Because if you've been preparing for that and that's how you've been used to these Ofsted inspections now, obviously that's been taken out and it's now the phone call before 10 a.m. And then there's a follow-up of an email and then there's a planning phone call all on the same day. So it depends on whether or not you'd prefer that over a learning walk. But obviously that's how it is now. So, but yeah, I think, like you said, Katie, a learning walk is a chance to show off your setting, but this call, some people may prefer that instead.
And there's nothing wrong with when your inspector's there being like, I'd love to give you a quick little tour before we get started, where you can still get some of those points in. Or when you're doing observations as a leader, when you're doing observations with the Ofsted inspector, you can still drop in those little bits, can't you? Like, you can see that she's doing that there because in our curriculum we do XYZ. So I feel like all the same opportunities are there. It's just that the notification stage, like Charlotte said, is a bit different with the 2 phone calls and an email, and then the lack of learning walk. So slightly different, but not earth-shatteringly so.
So there will actually be a change to the grading. So there'll no longer be the outstanding grade. It will change to exceptional, strong standard, expected standard, needs attention, and urgent improvement. And safeguarding will be done separately, and you will either meet that or you won't. And that on the report card is underneath the grading. When you look at it, there is a YouTube video that you can watch where it does explain the new report card, and it is quite nice because it's available on mobile, so parents have got a nice view of it when they look at it. And there's also a nice bit as you scroll down where it says what it's like to be a child in the setting, which I think is a really nice section on there because it explains how the experience of the children and how the Ofsted inspector can see what they're getting out of being in that setting.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice addition as well, because the report card is mainly for parents, isn't it? And as someone who is looking at nurseries for a child, it is nice to be able to get that sort of that full rounded picture and having like a slightly more in-depth thing, report, assessment, whatever, to read about a setting. Because at the moment, when you look at an Ofsted report, you don't get that inspector was at the setting for 6 to 8 hours, do you? They're quite brief compared to everything they actually see and do. So I feel like the new report card layout does give you that little bit more, even if the judgments aren't that different themselves.
Yeah, and there's a bit at the bottom as well for they've introduced like an online insights platform for parents so that they can see what the childcare in their local area, the reports for those, which I think is quite nice, so they can do a bit of background research before looking into nurseries for their children.
And also, just from like a practitioner perspective, you can use that to see how your nursery is comparing to others, or if you're looking at a new role, that's a great way for you to see, does this setting align with my personal values? So actually that's quite beneficial to everyone. And I think it really does show that Ofsted are now taking this approach of, like Georgia said, like context is king with these new things. It's giving you as much information as you can so you understand as much as possible about the setting.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, Katie. They were focusing on making information accessible to parents, but I hadn't even considered that would be a really interesting platform for practitioners to get information from as well, because it's accessible to everybody. So that's a step forward as well. So I would say from the webinar itself, something that kept cropping up as a key highlight was a massive focus on inclusion. Strengthened approach to inclusion, and it's actually going to be assessed on its own now. Also weaved within all of the other assessment areas as well. Within this, it's going to be a big focus on children with barriers, so SEN needs or oral hygiene, things like that. And a quote that I found quite interesting from it was, if you get it right for the most vulnerable, you get it right for all. So they're really focusing on inclusion within their new inspections.
That's a nice quote. I like that they are doing a big emphasis on inclusion and vulnerable children, but they're not forgetting all the other children as well. It is about all, but there's just now a bigger emphasis on inclusion.
And what I'm liking about what you can see with their focuses through the different themes that we're talking about today is that the Ofsted inspection, let's call them reforms, are very much in line with the wider picture of what's happening in education at the moment. Like, the focus on the inclusion is very much in line with the SEND reforms that are coming up in the next couple of months. That aligns perfectly. they did make a point of looking at inclusion isn't just children with SEND, it's also looking at disadvantaged children. It's also going to be focusing on how babies are supported. And that's, again, very much in line with this influx of babies that we're currently seeing coming into early years settings due to the increased government funding. So I think it's reassuring to see that they are putting the focus, because they understand that there is an increased pressure and need in those different areas. And I think from a practitioner perspective, it could be quite intimidating to be told, like, we're focusing on inclusion and we're going to be looking out for that. Just like having something that an inspector is definitely going to be pinpointing when they come to inspect you, it is intimidating. But from a practitioner perspective, I really think it's just making sure that you are able to explain clearly how each activity is adapted to the individual needs of each child. And that is each child, not just a particular child with SEND, for example. So it's also not just thinking about activities, it's thinking about like what you do day to day in your setting that is adapted to the individual needs of children. So that could be anything from putting on their coats, how you support different children to do that, when you're doing transitions from different parts of the nursery, because personally, that was always my most chaotic time of day, would be like going from the dining room back to where we live for the rest of the day, and toilet and support, those things. So I think it's actually really nice that it's going to be making us think more in depth about how we do support all children in those different areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've just highlighted how inclusion is absolutely just weaved into everything you do in day-to-day life in early years. So as much as, like you said, it can seem intimidating, it's probably things that you're already doing.
And all of that very nicely leads into this I want to say renewed focus on staff wellbeing, because it is a lot to be thinking about. An inspection day is scary, but actually working in early years is hard work. It's a lot of pressure. It's an emotionally draining job and it's a physically draining job. There's a lot of different things that we need to consider, and you're responsible for a lot. So staff wellbeing as a focus from Ofsted inspectors, I think is really key, because it's something they've mentioned before being a focus, but I didn't think it was personally prioritized. It kind of felt like a little bit tokenistic in the way that they were doing it. But now they're going to be coming into inspections and they're going to be talking about how well-being and workload are considered. And I think it's really key taking workload into consideration. And they're going to be talking to staff and practitioners about how they feel valued and if their workload is managed fairly, and how any unnecessary pressures are avoided. So it's being prepared as a practitioner to discuss that, but also as a leader, being prepared to give the context on what you do to prevent workload pressure, to prevent stress in the workplace.
Yeah, I think it's a nice addition that they've added, really, because obviously, like you said, Katie, working in early years is great. It's fun, and the children are great, but it is very hard. Some days it is a lot, and I think unless you've worked in the job, you don't understand how challenging it can be some days. And I think it's really nice to have leaders and managers and just staff in general that are very open and can communicate. And it's not just things like, oh, here's a cup of tea because you've had a hard day. It's actually been, listening to people and showing that you've listened to them by your actions of like, right, I can see this is where the problem is. Let's do something about it. Instead of just putting, like, it's nice to put snacks in the staff room, don't get me wrong, but it's not.
I will eat those snacks.
But it's not fixing the problem. And I think with leaders and managers, it is really important that their staff do feel supported with that. And I feel like Ofsted are really looking to, make sure it's not just like materialistic things that are being given, it's actually being supported properly.
And again, it links back to this wider focus from sort of like the DfE and the government, that they are starting to acknowledge that there is a lot of pressure on the early years workforce and something needs to change. People are leaving faster than ever. We are struggling to get in the staff needed to uphold the things that they are bringing in, like the increased funding for younger children. We don't know what the SEND reforms are going to be like yet, but that's going to call for more staff. So I think it's actually really nice that they're having that focus. And like you said, Charlotte, they're not going to be coming in and being like, oh, you do pizza on Fridays for lunch, that's nice. Or when you cook a roast dinner for lunchtimes, you sometimes give staff some if there's a bit of spare food. It is going to be, if someone comes to you with a problem, how are you solving it? And how do you support them emotionally? What is the process? But also, pizza on Fridays is a great idea, and I would love to work at a workplace that does that. So I'm not saying don't do that. I actually advocate for that.
Yeah, they can be nice added extras.
And the final thing to be aware of is the timeline of when all of this will be happening. So the changes to the inspection themselves will be commencing from November 2025.
Nice. That's not that far away.
No, it's not. It's a chunk. It's not that far away at all, actually. I've just checked my calendar. That's closer than I even realised. But it's still a good chunk of time to read toolkits and get your head around things. And there will be fewer initially, is something that was raised last night. And they'll be led by the most experienced inspectors to begin with, just to sort of set off on the right foot and sort of do a steady outpour of like the new inspection style.
That's really interesting to hear. So it's not like they're just going in full pelt. They're going to be taking it slowly, because obviously they have tested these types of inspections, but it's good to see that they're like, we're going to do it slow because we want to do it right.
Yes, exactly. That was the focus, that they said they wanted it to be a steady and assured start to the new inspections. So that's a good approach, I think.
I think the big question that everyone wants to know is, how often am I going to be Ofsted inspected? Because we've been on a 6-year cycle, haven't we? Vaguely, kind of. Some people are, some people aren't. But moving forward, that is going to be changing into a 4-year cycle from April 2026. So people and settings will be inspected on a more regular basis, because the reality is anything can change in 6 years. It could be a completely different setting within 6 years. So I think having a tighter deadline, just knocking that couple of years off, probably does work out better for your setting, especially when you think about the things with the new report card and keeping all of that as up to date as possible. So you're constantly given a new reflection on your setting, I think is important. But just as a reminder, this isn't an outline of every single change that was listed in the webinar or the new inspection handbook. To get the latest information, you are going to need to read the handbook yourself, watch the webinars, and keep your own practice up to date. But I think these are just the ones that we felt were most key for most day-to-day practitioners. So if you ever have any more questions about this, or you want to discuss some of the changes with other practitioners, or you're just generally looking for some advice on what to do with your planning or your assessment or being an early years practitioner, we have tons of social media platforms that you can find us on, from Facebook to Facebook groups to X to YouTube to Pinterest to TikTok. If it exists, we are probably on it. But in the meantime, we will be back with you in a couple of weeks. We'll see you soon. Bye.
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 So that's it for today's episode. I hope you really enjoyed it. If you would like to join in or would like to know more, then come and find us on our social media sites. We have a Facebook page, Facebook groups, an Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Pinterest, and YouTube. All the links of where to find us will be in our podcast description. Come and join the conversation. And whatever you're doing today, I hope you have a great day.